islands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the afternoon. Staying bright in the east, but rain starting to turn up across northern and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Generally light and on and off during the daytime on Tuesday, but some heavier and more persistent rain moves south across Scotland overnight on Tuesday. Now, this is a weather front which will push south. It's not going to be a strong feature, but it will clear the way to more sunshine as we end the week and also colder conditions.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world. If
you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilized conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome to another week of On the Money, your daily weekday dose of economics, business and consumer news. I'm Liam Halligan. For the next hour, we'll be talking about soaring rail fares, the housing affordability crisis, and our ongoing GB News Scrap the VAT campaign, suggesting that the government scraps VAT on fuel bills to help hard-working families. As ever, grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. Join me on The Money after the GB News headlines with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It is 1:01. I'm Rosie Wright here with your GB News headlines. 2 teenagers have been arrested and held in Manchester as part of the investigation into the Texas synagogue attack. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. The 4 hostages held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville were unharmed. President Biden said it was an act of terror. The Prime Minister has reportedly been interviewed by Sue Gray as part of the investigation into Partygate allegations. The Telegraph says Boris Johnson has shared what he knows with the senior civil servant as she prepares to publish her report into number 10 coronavirus rule-breaking as soon as this week. Ms Gray is looking into several possible events, including a bring-your-own-booze garden party in May 2020. Novak Djokovic has landed in Belgrade after his visa to play in the Australian Open was cancelled. The Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison hinted that if the circumstances were right, Djokovic could be spared Australia's 3-year ban and compete at next year's Open. The deported tennis star now faces the prospect of being denied entry to the French Open after a government official confirmed that the new vaccination pass will be mandatory for international athletes. Amazon has reversed its decision to stop accepting Visa credit cards on its website. Well, it was meant to come into force from the 19th of this month due to a dispute with Visa over payment fees. In an email to its customers, the online retailer said it was working closely with Visa on a potential solution. 3 men have died following a 3-vehicle crash on the A1 near Stamford in Lincolnshire. The victims, aged 34, 25 and 38, died at the scene just before 1 a.m. on Sunday. 2 people were taken to hospital with serious injuries. In Tonga, a British woman has been reported missing after she was washed away in Saturday's tsunami. New Zealand state media reports say Angela Glover, who runs a dog rescue shelter, was swept away with her dogs while her husband managed to hold on to a tree. A volcanic eruption, which triggered the tsunami, has blanketed the Pacific Islands in ash, cut power and severed communications. New Zealand has sent a surveillance plane to Tonga to assess the damage and plans to send essential supplies, including drinking water, to the affected areas. Katie Greenwood from International Federation of Red Cross spoke to GB News and says 80,000 people are affected.
The majority of the population in Tonga relies on rainwater for their drinking water and for their water usage. And so that ashfall really is a significant disturbance for clean drinking water and for hygiene and health needs in the country. The relief response will be making sure that people have access to water purification technology and implements.
The Times newspaper says Boris Johnson is putting the military in charge of stemming Channel migrant crossings as part of an attempt to save his premiership. Asked about the reports, the Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi said a coordinated operation involving naval vessels and border force with a single command and control is a good idea. The Culture Secretary has indicated the BBC licence fee will be axed. In a tweet, Nadine Dorries said the next announcement about the fee is set to be the last. The yearly payment is expected to be kept at the current rate of £159 until April of 2024. Well, Labour's Shadow Secretary, Lucy Powell, says scrapping the licence fee is irresponsible.
It is cultural vandalism because she's ripping something up, she's smashing something up without any plan about how the BBC is going to survive and how it will continue to fund itself going forward. These are really important and valued assets that we have in this country that we shouldn't just be trashing and burning, trying to save the Prime Minister.
An asteroid bigger than any building on Earth is expected to soar past the planet on Tuesday. It poses no threat to Earth and at its closest will pass more than 5 times the moon's distance from the planet. You are now up to date here on GB News. I'll bring you more as it happens. Now, on the money and Liam.
And coming up on the money today, as the big energy companies apologise for encouraging households facing higher fuel bills to do star jumps, and as they say sorry for sending cash-strapped families socks, I kid you not. We're pressing ahead with our GB News Scrap the VAT on Energy Bills campaign. And we're talking train shortages as 10% of rail staff fall sick to COVID this month. A temporary train timetable is being introduced today to cope with the lack of staff. Our South East reporter Ellie Costello reports from Upminster. She gets all the glamorous gigs. Plus, each day on The Money features an in-depth Money Talks interview with a business leader or policymaker. Coming up, a landmark exclusive discussion with Polly Neate, Chief Executive of the campaigning charity Shelter.
got an enormous crisis of affordability as well. So again, because of the lack of social homes, we do have to keep returning to that, because it actually is the problem. But because of that, we've got people who are really on the edge, who are living in private renting with no savings. So the vast majority of families in private renting have no savings at all. And these are people who, in the main, are not, they're not kind of like one paycheck away from home ownership. They're not on the cusp of home ownership. They're on the cusp of homelessness.
Well worth watching and listening on GB News Radio, on GB News TV, to that On the Money exclusive with Polly Neate, the executive of Shelter. As ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. We'll read out some of your messages later in the show. Stay with us. This is GB News, on television, on radio. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. Now, last week, the energy company OVO apologised after advising companies to do star jumps, cuddle pets and eat porridge to cut down energy bills and stay warm. The energy firm, one of the UK's largest suppliers, said it was embarrassed by a blog offering 10 tips on keeping warm in the winter without turning up the heat. These included having a cuddle with your pets and loved ones, challenging the kids to a hula hoop contest, or doing a few star jumps, direct quote. Not to be outdone, another energy giant, E.ON, also apologised for sending branded socks to tens of thousands of households with advice to turn down the heating to help reduce carbon emissions. Energy bills will significantly rise in April when a new household energy price cap kicks in. Household fuel costs have already reached record levels, of course, over recent months, as increased demand plus supply and storage issues have caused wholesale gas prices to spiral. When the new household price cap is announced in February, it's set to soar from £1,277 now for the average household to more than £2,000. Again, that's for the average household. This rise will hit millions of us hard. For large energy companies, I would say, in the midst of a cost of living crisis, to josh about star jumps and sending polyester socks through the post to people, that's a serious misjudgment. The public relations professionals that came up with those ideas, in my view, have a lot to learn about relations and, indeed, about the public. The share of families suffering fuel stress, that's spending at least 10% of your family budget on energy, that's set to treble to 6.3 million households overnight. That's from the Resolution Foundation, a respected think tank. Around 1 in 4 households then. No laughing matter. Such fuel stress will extend beyond the poorest households, with low and even middle-income families struggling, the latter, of course, not eligible for benefits. And that's why GB News is calling on the government to scrap VAT on fuel bills, something that can be done now. A policy move within ministers' power now we've left the European Union. The cost of living squeeze is tightening. Hard-working families are already facing higher inflation and tax rises in April. So we're renewing our call on the UK government to help families cope with spiralling household energy bills by scrapping the VAT. As ever, On the Money, grown-up discussions with people who really know their stuff. I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Evans, the Shadow Minister for Defence Procurement, and, of course, the CEO of Blonde Money. Front of the show, here she is, Helen Thomas. Great to see you both. Thanks for coming into the studio. Chris, let's go to you first. Great to have an opposition frontbencher on GB News, as ever. You're always welcome. Of course, your party, early last week, just after we started this campaign, actually, here on GB News, you hosted an Opposition Day debate in the Commons, didn't you?
Yeah.
Focused on scrapping the VAT.
It's great to be here, Liam. It's fantastic to be on GB News, and thanks for inviting me along.
Pleasure.
I absolutely agree with scrapping VAT on energy bills. At the end of the day, VAT is all about being charged on what you buy rather than what you earn. But in terms of energy bills, this is an absolute essential. You've got to have energy bills, you've got to warm your house. And I think that the energy companies have us over a barrel. They've been patronising this week and downright embarrassing for any major company. You're absolutely right to say that they need to think about their public relations. But in this case, it's in the government's power now to get rid of VAT, and I think that we should do it. Also, I think for those who voted for Brexit, which I know many of your viewers would have done, it's an article of faith as well.
And indeed, Wales, as a majority, voted for Brexit.
Yes, yes. And we were told that VAT would be taken off energy bills. It needs to be done, and it needs to be done now for so many hard-working families, as you said. We have a situation where 27 energy companies have now gone bust. We see household bills rising all the time. And I think the government really needs to take action to stand up to these embarrassing energy companies. I think star jumps and branded socks are the way forward.
Now, Helen, you and I agree on lots. We don't agree on this, funnily enough, which is great because disagreement, discussion, debate is what On the Money and GB News is all about. So let me put it to you. It is only 5% on your energy bill, but that's over 100 quid for the average household. That's an awful lot of money, particularly for those households who won't qualify for those means-tested benefits that the most vulnerable households get, the winter fuel allowance and so on. So what of it?
Well, you've thrown me under the bus a bit there. You're having this lovely chat, which made an awful lot of sense, and I felt the passion, which is wonderful because I've worked in economics and I've worked in politics.
You have indeed.
And actually, this is one of those moments where they meet.
They do.
The economics and the politics meet. There are so many parts to this. One of the elements we have mentioned before, of course, is that. You mentioned there it benefits, it's about what you buy, not what you earn. So in a funny way, it does also help rich people because they will also get the benefit from this drop in VAT. Now, it might still be worth doing. But that is something to bear in mind.
Totally agree with that.
And then the other part is, yes, £100 in a year, that's right, isn't it?
Roughly for the average household. If it's £2,000, 5% is 100 quid.
Yes.
We expect the average bill, the price cap, to go up above £2,000 when it's announced in early February to come in April.
Yes, and not to be sniffed at, it is a decent amount of money that would make a difference to people, but there is potentially more that can be done because an element of the fuel price is, for example, green subsidies. Now, again, political priorities. We've just had COP26. Do you want to go tinkering around with that? But if you reduced or even scrapped those, not saying you should, but just from the numbers, you'd actually get an even bigger saving.
Now, Helen's absolutely right, of course, as she is about most things. We are looking now at 20-25% of your fuel bills are those levies that go to companies that are developing renewable energy. They might go to wealthy landowners. My view would be, Chris, in the reality of politics, there's no way that Boris Johnson's going to scrap those in time for these May elections. Because that would you have to legislate, right? You'd have to undo Theresa May's 2050 net zero legislation. Boris Johnson would look really silly in front of all the international leaders who came to Glasgow for COP26, as Helen rightly says. So I can't see that happening before April. I can't see Rishi Sunak going back on the tax rises that are coming in April. Again, that's a huge hole in the Chancellor's budget. The Prime Minister isn't strong enough to tell the Chancellor at this point, Partygate, what to do. But I do think he could scrap the VAT. So I would say, politically, this is the most realistic thing we could push the government to do. And I guess, to some extent, the Labour Party agrees with that.
I think the question really is, you scrap the VAT on VAT, the government will include that in their take for the revenue for the year. So what do you replace that with? There is an argument to say the windfall tax on the oil producers in the North Sea. Is that a way forward? I'm quite interested, Helen, in hearing from you. Obviously, we want a grown-up conversation here about what you would think. Would a windfall tax on the oil producers help make up for that shortfall in the 5%? Because that would, taking the 5%, of course, would take away take revenue away from the government. So I think we also have to say, what are we going to replace it with? And the Labour Party has said a windfall tax on the oil producers, and it has been used to good effect in the past when we had a windfall tax on the privatised utilities under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. So, Helen, I sort of bat that question to you. Do you think a windfall tax would make up for that shortfall in revenue?
Well, I would spin it around further. Before I go into that, it would, to a degree, offset some of the revenue loss. Then you've got a question about incentives, as you have with any windfall tax.
Indeed.
Are you penalising very successful businesses? Now you might question why they have made super profits. That's, again, the political question. But I actually, at this point, would take a bigger question, which is about, do you need to pay for it? And that might sound astonishing, a question, to ask, but we have hugely bust this budget deficit. The government is spending massively. This is a moment, potentially to keep spending.
Then what you're doing there, you're zooming out, if you like, to the bigger political picture. This is what she does. This is why she's so good. That's why we have her on the money all the time. But what I would say in this three-way discussion, I'm not agreeing with you, Chris, on Labour's windfall tax on fuel in the North Sea. I'm not going there for now. We will examine it in detail as and when it becomes, or doesn't, politically more realistic. What I'm saying to both of you, though, is actually Rishi Sunak's got a lot more VAT revenue lately than he thought he was going to get, because we're not going to grow by 6.5% this year. We could grow by 7.5%. That's what the numbers are looking like. So in a couple of words, do you think that money, that extra VAT, should be diverted to cutting the VAT, even without your windfall tax on North Sea?
My genuine belief is we cut that 5% VAT on energy bills, you're putting money in people's pockets. That means they've got more spending power, which would also increase the economy as well. I think that's as simple as that. Really.
Final word from you, Helen?
We've mentioned before that energy price shocks, they also hit just general sentiment, uncertainty. And that is also a potential hit to growth. So there is certainly a signalling power that you could get from scrapping the VAT that could reinvigorate the consumer.
This is not the first time we've talked about scrapping the VAT, and it won't be the last. This discussion to be carried on. Helen Thomas, great to see you. Chris Evans, delighted to have you in the studio. See you next time here.
See you next time.
On the Money. Chris Evans there, Labour shadow frontbencher for defence procurement. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we'll be hearing from Daniel Kenny. He's the owner of Rent-A-Keg, a business which allows you to set up a pub in your back garden for a day. Someone should have told the Downing Street staff. He'll also be telling us what it's like to set up a luxury camping business during the pandemic, tapping into those staycations. That's today's Startup Britain. Stay with us. Whether you're listening on GB News Radio, watching on the telly or your laptop, stay with us because you are On the Money.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine actually for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the afternoon. Staying bright in the east, but rain starting to turn up across northern and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Generally light and on and off during the daytime on Tuesday, but some heavier and more persistent rain moves south across Scotland overnight on Tuesday. Now, this is a weather front which will push south. It's not going to be a strong feature, but it will clear the way to more sunshine as we end the week and also colder conditions.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn.
And Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
And welcome back to On the Money. I'm Liam Halligan. We're here talking about Startup Britain. We're talking about a new company called Lunar Domes. And the person behind Lunar Domes is Mr. Kenny. Good to see you.
You too.
Tell me about the business.
So, Lunar Domes is basically a glamping business crossed over with sort of like a hotel business. We're trying to find that gap in the market there. So, in short, just luxury glamping.
And the business started during the pandemic. I think we can show some pictures here of these incredible domes. They're basically designed for the sort of staycation market, aren't they? These are places where families can go. Some people talk about glamping, glamorous camping. Is that basically what Lunar Domes is?
Yeah, so it's we try to say it's a little bit more than glamping because we want to step away from the sort of, tent in the back garden, the shepherd's hut, those kind of, they have certainly the rightful place in the market, but we wanted to go a bit more luxury than that. Yeah. Kind of like the European to national style of glamping, which is, a bit more high-end, robes, slippers, that kind of thing, coffee on demand, all that kind of stuff. Really.
So we've seen pictures of these amazing tents. And where are they located and where can people actually go to stay in them?
So our site's actually located in Chiddingstone Hoath, which is kind of the Kent-Surrey border. OK. Sat right in, castle country, really, like Hever Castle, Penshurst. Yeah. We've got 3 on site at the moment. We're expanding that to 6, which will be available soon. And then from there, we want to, kind of progress out towards possibly up to Bristol, Scotland. The funny thing is, when you own a site like that, you actually get contacted by quite a few site owners. Of course. And they're just like, come build this on our site. So we've got contacts as far as Sicily for people from France. So I suppose it's at the moment it's just obviously get site 1 on the way and then look to go further afield. You're
a bit of a serial entrepreneur, aren't you, Daniel? You've also got another company you've been running since 2010, Rent-A-Keg, that helps people set up bars in their gardens or in their conservatories on a temporary basis for parties and receptions and so on. What is it about you that makes you different from, say, other kids you grew up with that made you want to be an entrepreneur? Why is it easier for you? Why is it more attractive to you to work for yourself rather than working for someone else? Because it must be quite stressful.
Yeah, absolutely. There's certainly stress involved behind it. I suppose it's the independence. You can kind of choose your own hours. On paper that sounds great, but you always work more hours than you would in a 9 to 5. Right. Freedom is obviously.
And you're building something that's worth something, right?
Absolutely.
I guess in the end, you might run Lunar Domes, Rent-A-Keg, with all respect, for the rest of your life. Or it may be that you build it into a business that's turning over revenue, got a brand, got a reputation, got a client base, and then you can sell that to someone else and sail off into the sunset, assumably.
Well, that would be nice. I have actually started companies and I had sold one in the past, so good for you. It has worked out, and that's how the Lunar Domes came about. But absolutely, it's about building your own brand, sort of like your own identity within the company, and it's something that's yours. That's it. I'm sure there are people who prefer to take different avenues, but for me, it was always that I wanted to build something that was mine I could share with other people.
What's the hardest thing about starting a business? Is it raising finance? Is it overcoming your own fear? Is it other people's attitudes telling you can't do that? Why don't you just get a normal job? You're being... What is it?
I suppose it depends on the individual, but for me, I'm not sure the hardest part with it. It was probably just the hard work and getting it done. I mean, there's always risk in business, but it's certainly getting over the fear factor in certain areas.
When did you realise you were really onto something with lunar domes? Because you've grown quite well over recent months, haven't you? And did you start it when you saw the pandemic happening, or were you doing it anyway, and then lunar domes kind of worked suddenly because nobody could travel abroad for a while, so everybody wants to stay for a staycation in the UK?
Well, it was exactly that. I mean, it was an idea that I already had from previous businesses, and it's something I developed, and when it basically started to get the ball rolling, the pandemic came about, and it was perfect timing, really.
And we can see the domes there. They're really quite substantial, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, what can I say? There's a lot of time and effort and love has gone into actually building and designing.
So do they stay up all year, or do you just pitch them at certain times of the year? For instance, can you stay in a lunar dome for Christmas, or during the winter for St Valentine's Day, for instance?
Whenever you want.
February the 14th.
All year
so they
round.
stay up all the time, right?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
So are there? Do you have competitors here in the UK? Glamping has kind of become a bit of a thing.
Yeah.
I mean, this seems to be a big market. And do you think, Daniel, that the new trend towards staycations forced upon us because of the pandemic, is that going to stick a little bit, or are we instantly going to start going abroad again?
Do you know what? It's
because that's the question for your business, really, isn't it?
That is the question for the business. We've certainly seen trends. I mean, in December, for example, with the unknown of the new variant, we saw a decline, but now we're kind of at the other side of that, we've seen a huge raise. So I think it really depends on people's confidence at the time. I mean, at the moment, I can't see it changing, but also it's
interesting.
The UK have been made aware that there's a lot of lovely places on their doorstep, and there's many opportunities to go and stay at places like ours. So whilst I think it's definitely helped boost it, whether or not we see a decline, who knows? But hopefully it won't be a huge decline. It will keep on ticking over.
Well, we've been having a little look at the business here at GB News. You're obviously onto something. You seem to be doing quite well, so we'll wish you luck and end with asking you the question we always ask our Startup Britain entrepreneurs. What's your advice to viewers, listeners, thinking about starting a business, thinking that maybe they've got a little bit of what you've got, that entrepreneurial zeal?
Just do it. Just go for it. Work hard, go for it. Put in all the hours that you can, just go for it. Don't let anybody hold you back.
Don't let anybody hold you back. That's the main thing. Daniel Kenny, it's great to meet you. All the best with your business. Thanks for coming here on The Money and being our latest Startup Britain guest. Daniel Kenny there, founder of Lunar Domes and the man behind Rent-A-Keg. Now, many of us, myself included, have been left waiting for a delayed train in recent weeks. Well, sadly, I'm afraid it's only going to get worse. Don't shoot the messenger, because today train timetables are being introduced that cut a number of services across the country. Our South East reporter Ellie Costello has been finding out more.
Well, today I'm outside Upminster train station in Essex, which is serviced by a C2C, which runs along the south of Essex. And from today, it has a reduced timetable with a reduced number of trains running into London. And that is partly down to a staff shortage. They have lots of drivers and reception staff that are isolating with the Omicron variant. And it's also down to a loss of passengers. Lots of people are following government advice from December, telling them to work from home where they can. And that means that fewer and fewer people are getting the train into their offices in London. And in some parts of the southeast, passenger footfall is down at 40 to 50%. So it makes it very difficult for these train companies to keep a full service running. So I spoke to Simon Calder, who's a travel expert, and I asked him why these train companies are running reduced services.
All the train operators are saying we are really worried about the number of passengers, and that I think is more important than the depleted staff numbers. And why would you run empty trains? That's the big question. They're already being subsidised by taxpayers to the tune of £1 million an hour. It's perfectly understandable that the train companies should want to align the services they run with the number of passengers they've got and the number of available staff. But the problem with cutting services is that you reduce the train offers maybe from once every half hour to just once an hour, and that puts more and more people off travelling by train. The only way that the rail industry is going to be rescued is by people leaving their cars, whether it's for work or for fun, just switching to the train instead, and you've got to make it an attractive option.
that's Simon Calder there, who is a travel expert. And it's not just C2C who are affected. Southwestern have also got a reduced timetable that is out today. And Southern Rail, also in the southeast, has been in the press a lot recently in the past few weeks. They had a 2-week period of not actually sending any trains to London Victoria, and that again was due to a staff shortage due to COVID and a decrease in passenger numbers. And it's a pattern that we're seeing across the UK too. On Hull trains, they have temporary timetables until February the 12th. On Great Northern, they have a reduced service until further notice. Also reduced service on ScotRail, London North Eastern, London North Western, South Western Railway, as we just discussed, and West Midlands as well have got replacement buses and cancellations. So it does seem that anywhere in the country now you're more likely to have a delayed service or a less frequent service than you would have a normal one. It's definitely something that people are experiencing up and down the country. But what is happening today is that period of self-isolation for the Omicron variant is being reduced from 7 days, based on the fact that you've had 2 negative lateral flows, to 5 days. And there is the hope for these train companies that that will ease some of the staffing pressures, which has called for this reduced timetabling.
Our southeast reporter there, Ellie Costello, in her natural habitat of Upminster. But of course, this is GB News talking about depleted train timetables across the whole of the country. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. Coming up, it's today's Money Talks interview. It's with Polly Neate. She's the chief executive of the campaigning charity Shelter. But first, it's the GB News headlines once more with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon, it is 1:33. I'm Rosie Wright to get you up to date here on GB News. Now, 2 teenagers have been arrested and held in Manchester as part of the investigations into the Texas synagogue attack. Malik Faisal Akram, a British man from Blackburn in Lancashire, was shot dead by FBI after holding people hostage in a 10-hour standoff on Saturday. The 4 hostages were held at Congregation Beth Israel in Colleyville. They were all unharmed. Novak Djokovic has landed in Belgrade after his visa to play in the Australian Open was cancelled. The Australian Prime Minister, though, hinted that if the circumstances were right, Djokovic could be spared Australia's 3-year ban and compete at next year's Open. The deported tennis star now faces the prospect of being denied entry to the French Open after a government official there confirmed the new vaccination pass will be mandatory for international athletes. The energy price cap could rise by more than 50% this April to around £2,000 per year. That's an average increase of £700 per household. The analysis from the Resolution Foundation think tank says the number of families spending at least 10% of their budget on energy bills could triple as a result. 3 men have died following a 3-vehicle crash on the A1 near Stamford in Lincolnshire. The victims, aged 34, 38 and 25, died at the scene just before 1 a.m. on Sunday. 2 people were taken to hospital with serious injuries. Amazon has reversed its decision to stop accepting Visa credit cards on its website. The move was meant to take effect from January the 19th due to a dispute with Visa over payment fees. Well, in an email to customers, the online retailer said it was working closely with Visa on a potential solution. You're up to date. GB News is on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. I'll keep you up to date across the afternoon. Shortly, we'll be back to On the Money.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, Talking Pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamonn
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back. It's 1:37 and you're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. It's time now for my daily interview series, Money Talks. And today I'm talking to Polly Neate, Chief Executive of the campaigning charity Shelter. Since the mid-1960s, Shelter's been at the centre of the British debate about the provision of temporary accommodation and housing for low-income and vulnerable families. In this exclusive On the Money interview, we discuss the UK's housing affordability crisis, the need for much more social housing, and how Britain's housing emergency has become much worse during the pandemic. Here it is. It's Money Talks. Polly, Shelter is a very special organisation, isn't it? It was created in the late 60s. It coincided with that famous Ken Loach film, Cathy Come Home. How do you feel to be the person who actually runs Shelter?
Well, what a great question. It's a huge honour to run an organisation like Shelter that was, we have been set up to improve the situation of people who are homeless or facing homelessness. And in a way, it's a bit of a shame we're still here because it does show that since 1966, things have not got an awful lot better. And that's kind of disappointing, but it's not disappointing in a way for me. It's an absolute honour. I love my job. I've always known of the organisation, and so it does particularly feel like a real honour.
I think viewers should understand that Shelter isn't just a campaigning organisation that offers practical help to people when they're homeless, when they're trying to get social housing. Shelter is also a kind of policy-making powerhouse. You have very smart people who are constantly trying to influence the public policy debate on housing across the board.
So we help people directly. So our helpline, our emergency helpline, is the front line of homelessness prevention. That's where it happens. And we also provide face-to-face support around the country as well. And in fact, that's most of what we do. But I'm a great believer that if you really want to change things, you have got to go upstream and look at why so many people are seeking our help in the first place. And in order to do that, you have got to look at the policy arena, and you've got to campaign, and you've got to work with governments as well in order to try and make change. So we try and influence public opinion, and we try and influence politicians directly.
Just talk to me a bit about the extent of overcrowding here in the UK, the extent of homelessness, not only before the pandemic, but how the pandemic has exacerbated housing issues at the sharp end.
Yeah, it has. So our most recent research shows that there are 274,000 people homeless in England at the moment. That is a huge number. It's definitely increased due to the pandemic.
And that doesn't just mean people sleeping on the streets, it means people in bed and breakfast accommodation, emergency shelter housing.
People in hostels, people in B&Bs. But let's just be clear, of course rough sleeping is the most visible and in some ways most distressing form of homelessness, that is the tip of a huge iceberg. And what we're really looking at is families with children in bed and breakfast. And what I'm talking about is, one room. You've got maybe a mum and 3 kids in one room. All along the corridor, both sides are rooms that are the same with other families in. And you've got a communal shared kitchen at one end, a shared bathroom and toilet at the other end. So we are talking about really unlivable so-called temporary accommodation that actually people are ending up in for years. This is a type of homelessness that is very, very real. It is ruining lives. It's ruining hundreds of thousands of children's lives. And, people don't really see it in the way that they see the kind of 5,000 or so people who are sleeping rough on any given night. There's 700,000 people at the moment living in overcrowded homes as well.
On top of the 300,000
on top of the homelessness.
So we're talking about 1 million people are seriously impacted either in overcrowded homes or in temporary accommodation.
Yeah, and that's not taking account of also damp and unlivable conditions. So that 700,000 is just overcrowding. You've also got hundreds of thousands of people in homes that are damaging their health through damp and other infestations, other kind of significant disrepair issues in both the social housing sector and also private renting. And we've got an enormous crisis of affordability as well. So again, because of the lack of social homes, we do have to keep returning to that because it actually is the problem. But because of that, we've got people who are really on the edge, who are living in private renting with no savings. So the vast majority of families in private renting have no savings at all. And these are people who, in the main, are not, they're not kind of like one paycheck away from home ownership. They're not on the cusp of home ownership. They're on the cusp of homelessness. So,
and a better solution would be if they were in social housing, they could pay a subsidised rent to the state and have a permanent address in which they can build a family and build a future.
Totally, have a permanent address, have some stability, the ability to build a better life for themselves, and hopefully to save. Because affordable rent means that people are not spending a disproportionate amount of their income on rent. They're able to, A, buy other essentials, but also put aside money for their dreams, one of which I'm sure is home ownership. But we've got to take policy to where people are, to the reality of the housing crisis, and that's what we're not doing at the moment.
We focus a lot on the money, on a lack of homes to buy. Lots of people email me saying, Liam, why can't my kid buy a house? I'm a postman, I could buy a house, my kid's got a degree, he or she can't buy a house. So often though, the public debate, the extent to which journalists focus on housing, it is all about home ownership, private rented homes, as you say. So it's great we have you here, the boss of Shelter, to focus on social housing, because it's at the sharp end of our housing crisis where the most human misery is, as you've described. Now, back in the late 70s, around 1 in 3 households in the UK were social housing, council houses, if you like. It's now between 15 and 17%, depending on the definition. A lot of council houses were sold off in the 80s and 90s, and indeed even David Cameron reinstigated the idea of right to buy, and yet almost all those council houses weren't replaced. We build hardly any social housing these days. Obviously, housing associations, the charities build some, but local authorities don't. How serious is this shortage, Pauline, of social housing now?
I mean, it's an absolute crisis. So last year we built less than 6,000 new social homes, and actually there was a net loss of more than 22,000 social homes. So, and we've got 1.1 million people on the waiting list. It's a policy desert, social housing, really. Nothing is being done about it. It's really funny, when I talk about social housing, especially to some politicians, I kind of often get the question, or people often react as though I'm somehow against home ownership in some way, And
it's not an either or, is it?
No, of course not. And, of course people aspire to own their own home. But we've got to, as I say, we have to take policy to where people are, to where the crisis really is now. And that is for people on low incomes who at the moment have no prospect of a safe and secure and stable home. And that desire that we all have for home ownership, that is about a desire for a home that we can build our lives in, raise our families in. That's what people want from social homes as well. The kind of basic human need that we all feel, that Englishman's home is his castle feeling, is about that security and stability. And at the moment, we're not thinking about that in the wider sense. We're not thinking about the fact that people on low incomes want that just as much as people who can currently afford to own their own homes.
And the lack of social housing, the lack of your own front door for kids, the lack of a kitchen table where they can do their homework, all of which social housing can provide, surely that has massive knock-on effects in terms of delinquent behaviour, crime, offending, jail population and so on.
Yes, and in terms of homeless families, what they're struggling with, and particularly during COVID as well, is a really kind of unlivable situation, and that can lead, in the worst cases, we're seeing an increase in domestic abuse. We're seeing children being received into care. We've done surveys of teachers that shows that homelessness has a really bad negative impact on kids' education and educational attainment. So we're seeing the kind of creation of generational problems that aren't necessary. If you think about children born into homelessness, born into temporary accommodation, that's a real disadvantage that potentially will stay with them throughout their lives. And if what you want is a society of aspiration and where ultimately people can aspire to home ownership and to financial security, you have got to give people a secure starting point. If we're talking about levelling up has to start with people feeling that the country is invested in them and in their lives. And if they don't have a secure and stable place to live, they will not feel that.
We're going to come on to that because I do detect, and maybe you do too, a slight changing of mood, certainly on the government backbenches, towards social housing. A lot more people coming over to your point of view, to Shelter's point of view, what might lazily be called a left-wing point of view. I don't think it's left-wing to want more social housing, and I know a lot of Conservatives who would agree with that. But before we come on to that, Polly, I do want to explore that. Let's just look back a little bit too. Margaret Thatcher famously instigated the right to buy.
Yeah.
The Tories in the 80s famously built fewer council houses than Conservative and Labour governments had during the 50s, 60s and 70s. But she built a lot more council houses than Blair and Brown.
Completely.
Right? It was under Blair and Brown that the building of council houses absolutely collapsed. Why?
Gosh, that's such an interesting question, isn't it? I think it is this concept that home ownership and social homes are somehow in contention. And there's a fight to be the party of home ownership, and therefore a kind of increasing tendency to neglect people in social housing who actually will never aspire to home ownership, as I said before, if they can't save and if their rent isn't at an affordable level. So it's very short-sighted, but I think it was almost a kind of race to own the idea of home ownership. Yeah. And I think what Margaret Thatcher very successfully did was harness the power of that idea as a political force, and all power to her.
Yeah, and many people watching this will have grown up in homes that were council houses that their parents bought, and they will be screaming at the telly now, that transformed our lives.
And I'm sure it did, and good, great. The problem is...
But for every one you sell, you've got to build another one, right?
Yeah,
and that's what didn't happen.
Because what's happened is that through that, we've denied that to future generations.
Yeah.
You know, the reason there isn't Right to Buy now accounts for almost no new home ownership. It does a bit, so somebody's going to be shouting at the telly going, I just bought my council. Fine, yes. So there's a few, but it's a tiny drip. And when Right to Buy was at its heyday, it was accounting for a huge amount of people newly into home ownership. Now, it's an absolutely minute fraction. Why? Well, you can't have a right to buy because there's nothing to buy, because we're not building any more social homes. So the whole cycle has been broken, and we're not solving the housing crisis, which, as you said, you know, the human impact of the housing crisis is on those people on low incomes. And actually, you know, at the moment, the home ownership products that the government is developing, in the absence of anything to apply the right to buy to, are really out of reach.
Like shared ownership and help to buy and all that stuff.
All of that is
What do you think of help to buy, which basically, it seems to me, jacks up the demand side of the housing market without doing anything about unlocking more supply?
Yeah, it's just not the answer, is it? It's helping a few people to buy their own homes. Many of them could have afforded to buy their own home anyway.
But pushing up prices for everyone else who can't access the scheme.
Who can't access.
That's so interesting, because here you are, Polly Neat, you know, the very respected head of Shelter, and think tanks like the Centre for Policy Studies, the Adam Smith Institute, the Institute of Economic Affairs, all, you know, very much think tanks on the right that would usually oppose you tooth and nail. When it comes to things like help to buy, when it comes to things like the need for more social housing, they completely agree with you.
Yeah, and, you know, Oliver Letwin in his review found you simply
Former Tory Cabinet Minister.
Yeah, you will not get your 300,000 new homes built a year unless you build a significant proportion of them as social homes. It simply cannot happen, and something has to be done about the supply side. It's, you know, it's more difficult. I guess it's difficult maybe in the Treasury because there is investment needed in this. You know, it's not free. But if you're serious about building significant numbers of new homes and you really want to end the housing crisis, then you will have to look at social housing in a serious way. Lots of Conservatives understand that. Lots of Conservative backbenchers that we talk to absolutely get this, and particularly some of those MPs in the former Red Wall seats, you know, whose constituents are really seriously impacted by this problem, and who possibly grew up in social housing themselves. You know, they completely understand why social housing is so critical for the country's future and for the whole concept of levelling up. Isn't going to mean anything if people don't have somewhere safe and secure to live.
That was Polly Neat talking to me exclusively. She's the Chief Executive of Shelter, and you can listen to the full 25-minute version of that interview, plus dozens of others extended Money Talks interviews now on my Money Talks podcast, or on the GB News YouTube channel, or via the GB News app. Now, just before we finish the show, I wanted to bring in some of your emails. Lots of you have been in touch about rising energy prices and our Scrap the VAT campaign here on GB News. Peter says, my partner and I are going to turn off our gas supply at the meter. We can heat water with an immersion heater, heat the house with electricity and cook with an electric oven and a microwave. Having one less bill will help with rising costs. And Stephen says, I'm a firm believer that the entire taxation system needs reform. We need to replace any loss of tax with another tax, but the problem is the entire system is broken. What's needed is a single and simple low percentage tax on income, that is earnings, winnings and returns on investment. Then we remove all other taxation, all exceptions and all limits. Keep your emails coming. We appreciate them all. gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @GBNews. That's all we've got time for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll be back tomorrow for more economics, business and consumer news at 1 p.m. on GB News Television, on DAB Radio. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Hello again. Another fine winter's day for many of us. In fact, for much of the country, blue skies will prevail through the day before frost and fog return overnight. High pressure still dominating the weather across the UK, and it will be for some time. Weather fronts staying clear, generally speaking. And under that high pressure, plenty of sunshine actually for much of the country during the rest of the day. You can see that widespread sunshine across England, Wales, Northern Ireland, much of central and eastern Scotland as well. Just some Cloudier skies there for the far north and west of Scotland, parts of northwest England, perhaps a few parts of the West Midlands. The cloud not really producing rain for the vast majority, and so it's going to be a dry and fine day with light winds and feeling pleasant enough in that sunshine, with temperatures not far from average for the time of year. Under clear skies, however, quite quickly temperatures will fall away as the sun goes down overnight, and as a result widespread fog will start to form, particularly across central and eastern parts of England as well as East Wales, where that fog will be dense in places and widely frosty. It will be -2, -3 Celsius in towns and cities, perhaps as low as -5 in some rural spots. Milder, though, for the far north as well as the west, and increasingly along the south coast we'll see cloud appear during Tuesday. That will help to lift the fog. I think the fog, though, will persist across parts of central and eastern England for some time before the more cloudy weather in the south and the west becomes extensive into the afternoon. Staying bright in the east, but rain starting to turn up across northern and western Scotland as well as Northern Ireland. Generally light and on and off during the daytime on Tuesday, but some heavier and more persistent rain moves south across Scotland overnight on Tuesday. Now, this is a weather front which will push south. It's not going to be a strong feature, but it will clear the way to more sunshine as we end the week and also colder conditions.
I'm Darren McCaffrey, and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamonn.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On